This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. I'll go back to full productivity once the NCAA tournament is over, but I think we can get through this show at about 65-70%. Here's what we got for y'all. So-called gun background check loopholes are in focus on Capitol Hill. We'll tell you more about how some lawmakers would like to expand restrictions on who can own a firearm. Plus, the future of live entertainment could look much like it did during the pandemic. We'll tell you how the live stream experience could be here to stay. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The murder trial of Derek Chauvin entered its second week, with the police chief of Minneapolis taking the stand today.
The goal is to resolve the situation as safely as possible. So you want to always have de-escalation layered into those actions of using force.
The longest serving officer on the force testified last week.
Pulling him down to the ground, face down, and putting your knee on the neck for that amount of time is just uncalled for.
The prosecution aims to show the jury that Chauvin violated police procedure when he knelt on George Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. The defense argues Chauvin did what he was trained to do.
Sometimes de-escalation, again, includes the use of force, right? The use of force can be a de-escalation tactic.
I was thinking of your example of displaying your weapon, and so I don't have a lot of knowledge in terms of physical force being used to actually de-escalate a situation.
Last week, several witnesses painted an emotional picture of Floyd's last moments. This week, the prosecution is expected to focus on proving why Chauvin's actions legally amount to murder and manslaughter. It's still not clear where this year's MLB All-Star Game will be held, but we do know it won't be in Atlanta. Over the weekend, Major League Baseball made the decision to change the location of this summer's All-Star Game to distance the league from Georgia and its new limits placed on voting. Delta and Coca-Cola, two of the largest companies in the state, also voiced their concerns against the bill, calling it restrictive. In Texas, both American Airlines and Dell spoke out against proposed election bills that place new limits on voting. We know money talks, so along with the public statements, it'll be interesting to see whether campaign donations from these big companies to the lawmakers behind the new bills will take a dip. According to Public Citizen, in the 2020 campaign cycle, corporations donated more than $20 million to lawmakers who supported voting restrictions. And seeing as we're still in a global pandemic, a COVID update for you, though it's not all bad news these days. The US is now giving more than 3 million COVID vaccines a day on average. According to the CDC, 32% of the US population has received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. More than 18% of the population is fully vaccinated. Last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said those who have gotten a COVID vaccine can travel without quarantining, but should still avoid non-essential trips. There are still concerns about a fourth wave in the US, something other parts of the world have already been dealing with. Today, India became the second country behind the US to report 100,000 new COVID cases a day. England is looking into mass testing as it begins to reopen after dealing with its latest wave of infections brought on by the UK variant. Meanwhile, Brazil has become the new epicenter of the pandemic, dealing with another variant. Experts disagree on what another surge could look like in the US, since much of the most vulnerable population is vaccinated. Our own Newsy Bellingcat series partnered with the BBC last week to reveal new details of the location and culprits in a potential war crime in Eastern Africa. We featured that reporting last Thursday on this show. In the fallout from that report, we're seeing new calls across the globe for accountability for the killings. Newsy's own Jake Godin has the details. Jake, what's up?
So since our reporting on April 1st, there's been a few statements. The G7 group of countries, they released a statement calling for the immediate withdrawal of Eritrean soldiers so that aid can be brought into the country safely and so that investigations could be done properly for potential war crimes and other human rights abuses. The British members of the parliament have asked Boris Johnson to try and push the United Nations Security Council to do some more direct action to get justice for the victims here. Even people like musicians, like The Weeknd, donated $1 million towards, I believe, the United Nations to help feed people in the region. And it's kind of adding to a course of like kind of international pressure to try and get the international community to do something. Ethiopia's government's response hasn't exactly been super reassuring. They released a statement to the BBC and CNN, who did their own parallel investigation with Amnesty International, and they were kind of wishy-washy on holding people to account. They said that they were investigating, but that there shouldn't be like rampant speculation on social media. Hopefully they'll actually be doing a joint investigation with a more objective group so that we can kind of hold these people to account.
It happens after every well-publicized shooting. Lawmakers and gun safety advocates call for stricter gun laws, while gun groups push back on those demands. When it comes to gun ownership, one of the things in focus are so-called background check loopholes, or ways that existing laws allow a wider range of people to purchase firearms. Newsy's Stephanie Liebergen explains.
Gun background check loopholes are again up for debate on Capitol Hill.
These gaps make it too easy for felons, abusers, and mentally unstable people to get their hands on guns and harm others.
So what are the loopholes that currently exist in the country's background check system? The gun show and internet loopholes are two of the most frequently mentioned. Federally licensed firearms dealers are required to run buyers through a background check for every sale, regardless of where that sale is completed. Private and unlicensed sellers don't face that same requirement, so they can sell firearms at gun shows or online without doing a background check. And even gun rights advocates recognize the rise of internet gun sales could be problematic.
Even though we know this is not how most criminals are getting their guns, it is a fairly easy avenue that they could potentially go through.
The Charleston loophole is linked to how long it takes to complete a background check. Federal law gives the National Instant Criminal Background Check System 3 days to process an application for a new firearm. If the check is still pending 3 days later, the sale can proceed. The Charleston loophole is named for the Emmanuel AME church shooting in Charleston, South Carolina, where the shooter bought his gun after that 3-day waiting period expired.
It's good in the long run for everyone if the ATF and the FBI have the manpower and the resources to get them done in a timely manner and to keep the system updated.
In general, a felony conviction of any kind or a misdemeanor conviction for domestic violence prohibits someone from buying a gun. Lawmakers want to add more misdemeanors to that list. Senator Amy Klobuchar has been calling for Congress to close the boyfriend loophole, which allows some people convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence to still purchase a gun. And during his 2020 campaign, President Joe Biden said he wants to close the hate crime loophole and prohibit people convicted of misdemeanor hate crimes from buying or possessing a firearm. Another concern, the Ghost Gun Loophole. People can purchase kits or partially manufactured firearms without a background check, and those can be turned into untraceable guns without a serial number. That's something President Biden has said he might address using an executive order.
These new weapons that are being made by 3D equipment that aren't registered as guns at all, there may be some latitude there.
The House already passed a bill requiring background checks on all firearm sales and transfers, with a few exceptions. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has promised to bring that bill to the floor for a vote, but it would likely need to be amended if it has any chance of passing the Senate. Stephanie Liebergen, Newsy, Washington.
Turns out Godzilla vs. Kong delivers on more than just its straightforward title. Who knew that a fight between a dinosaur and a big monkey would be the harbinger of something good in our lives? Here's what's trending. Godzilla and King Kong destroyed Hong Kong and the domestic box office over the weekend, possibly signaling that folks are ready to get back to the theater. I mean, duh. I've been talking about sneaking stuff into theaters on this show since the pandemic started.
We need Kong. The world needs him to stop what's coming.
The film, which features two ancient Goliaths straight up throwing hands, brought in $48.5 million in North America in the first 5 days after the release, which is a pandemic record. And the reviews haven't been bad either, with folks saying things like, "It's the right kind of dumb." Although Godzilla vs. Kong was also available on HBO Max, The box office numbers benefited from looser restrictions at this point in the pandemic. According to the New York Times, about 93% of theaters have now been cleared to open. The Godzilla vs. Kong debut means two things. One, it's a positive sign for moviegoing moving forward. And two, I really ought to look at the act of God clause in my homeowner's insurance just in case any Titans decide to tear up my neighborhood. If you see Publix popping up on your timeline today, just know it ain't about the sandwiches. The grocery store chain was trending after a 60 Minutes report alleged Florida Governor Ron DeSantis played favorites by using Publix to distribute COVID vaccines in wealthier areas of the state. The outlet says Publix and people connected to Publix donated to the governor's political action committee before his January announcement that the state was partnering with Publix to distribute vaccines. The additional criticism here is that people living in minority communities had to travel much further to reach Publix locations to get vaccinated. DeSantis has called the reporting a fake narrative, and Publix responded by saying 60 Minutes made an irresponsible suggestion that the contributions led to vaccine favoritism. March Madness is coming to an end, and the tournaments have been pretty lit, especially over the weekend. The number 1 seed Stanford women's team just barely eked out a win Sunday over number 3 seed Arizona, 54-53. The men's tournament wraps up tonight with Baylor going up against the undefeated Gonzaga, both number 1 seeds, and both teams are looking for their first national championship. Looking back, both tournaments gave us some memorable moments, like Jalen Suggs' 3-point buzzer beater against UCLA, or the women's teams calling out the NCAA for not providing them with sufficient workout equipment. All of this happened in the shadow of a deadly pandemic. The tournaments played out in centralized locations. The stands have been partially filled with cardboard cutouts of people. The players were administered daily COVID tests, and only one team, the men's team from VCU, had to bow out of competition because of multiple positive COVID cases. If the bubble worked for a bunch of college students, I'm sure it could work for some professionals, right? I speak for the company in saying that we wouldn't mind being bubbled in Hawaii. Just throwing that out there. Last night, I watched a live Instagram event called Versus featuring Earth, Wind & Fire and the Isley Brothers, two iconic bands who've been making hits for decades. I feel like I'm kind of used to the whole virtual concert thing at this point, and I'm sure that's how a lot of you are feeling also. It's been a necessity with in-person concerts being out of the question. But with things returning to normal, what exactly does that mean for the future of live music? Newsy's Casey Mendoza helps us get to the bottom of that question.
This game, can you hear the bass boom? I'm ready.
The biggest concerts of 2020 were virtual, and in 2021, that's likely not going to change.
And what we've learned over the past year is how to really think about digital and streaming and, how that can complement in-person and theater.
Shows like Live from the Artist Den have been streaming concerts for years, but even they had to adjust to the pandemic, find ways to film their entire season of shows remotely, and engage with fans who couldn't be there physically.
I wanted to make it something really, really special.
Dua Lipa's Studio 2054 garnered a staggering 5 million viewers, and BTS's 2-day Bang Bang Con made an estimated $19.7 million in ticket sales, with fans hosting online watch parties and saying it felt like they'd actually been at a concert in person. Overall, in the US, virtual concerts earned $610 million last year. That's more than the money made from downloads.
Fans are really excited to get back to live events, but equally as excited to continue live streaming and engaging with digital platforms.
A survey from the new live streaming platform Mandolin found that 91% of people who had attended a live stream since the beginning of 2020 said they would continue watching live streams even as live music returns.
We can give fans access to shows that they might not have seen before or be able to experience because they might not be coming on tour into that particular area.
Because of that, the future of concerts isn't going to be live or virtual. It's likely going to be a hybrid that combines in-person performances, virtual live streams, as well as theatrical showings. It gives labels and venues new streams of revenue, and it gives fans more ways to see and support their favorite artists.
The live stream experience gives the fans a different way to engage, make it feel like they're sitting front row, but also to have different unique experiences like digital meet and greets.
As more venues reopen, companies like Mandolin are partnering with them to uncap their rooms to global audiences. And as more cinemas reopen, companies like Artist Den are bringing concerts there too, starting this spring with the Lumineers.
We're already so fortunate to be in such a creative space, but this really just kind of took it to another level.
Casey Mendoza, Newsy, Chicago.
Some states are looking to get a wider range of health professionals to help administer COVID shots. The US is vaccinating more than 3 million people a day on average, which means there's a lot to do for the folks administering vaccines. Aside from giving out the shots, people need to be registered, they need to have their temperature checked, etc. Newsy's Lindsay Thies tells us that some states are keeping up with demand by expanding who can give the vaccine shots.
You may not think of the gym and vaccines having much in common, but as the U.S. vaccinates more than 2.8 million people a day, some states are turning to health professionals that pre-COVID would have been here to help now. At Bergen Newbridge Medical Center in Paramus, New Jersey, it's a very busy day. They're giving out about 1,200 vaccines. That means hundreds of vaccine cards, hundreds of people getting a first dose of Moderna, hundreds of second doses too.
Are you guys here for your first or second shot? Number 2. Excellent, second shot, good.
And as many vaccinators as they can get.
How many people have I vaccinated? Maybe roughly like 300.
Working to help with the shots, Daniela Dibella, who just weeks ago never imagined she'd be doing this.
I was actually very nervous. The first person I vaccinated right after, he was like, oh, that wasn't bad, but I was gonna scream to make you nervous.
At the end of February, New Jersey issued waivers that temporarily permit licensed athletic trainers to administer COVID-19 vaccines. So now, Daniela has gone from working with athletes to working with folks in her community.
I just got my second shot and I feel relieved. I'm one step closer to some normalcy.
An athletic trainer is different from a personal trainer you might see in the gym. They're certified, licensed healthcare professionals who practice in the field of sports medicine with high school, college, and professional teams.
Although we don't have official training on how to handle a pandemic, we've all been able to step up because in the world of athletics, everything is always unpredictable.
The athletic trainers provide a lot of help, and they're essential to getting the vaccines into the patients. They help draw up the vaccines, they help monitor the patients afterwards, and they help to actually administer the vaccines.
The athletic trainers must go through additional training before they can just start poking arms. But with more than 13 members of the Athletic Trainer Society of New Jersey, it's a huge potential dose of help.
We're making a difference and we're changing people's lives with these vaccines.
Trainers are just one example of licensed professionals that are helping with the vaccine efforts. Some states have also added nursing students, dentists, and even veterinarians along the way. I'm Lindsay Thies for Newsy.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. No licenses required. As vaccinations continue to pick up in the US, one of the most coveted items for people looking to get around is proof that you've been vaccinated. There have already been reports of vaccination card scams, and some travel services have said passengers need or will need in the future proof of a vaccination. New York's governor announced a vaccine passport to help get businesses in the state up and running again. Our partner Ariel Hickson reports on how it's being used and why some consider the passport controversial.
It's game night in New York City.
This is my first game since the pandemic, so yeah, it's been quite some time.
And fans are lining up with a new form of entry, the first vaccine passport in the U.S.
I think the Excelsior app is really easy to use. I downloaded it today after I got my antigen test 6 hours before the game. And I'm here at Madison Square Garden and I've got it all set up. I'll just click it and use it when I walk in.
The Excelsior Pass, created by IBM, is a fast way to show digital records of COVID-19 vaccinations or negative test results before entering a venue. The goal? to make reopening as safe and easy as possible.
I think this is a key component to reopening more quickly. You know, there's still a lot of restrictions out there in New York State.
New York is the first state to try out the app, and now Governor Andrew Cuomo says the technology can be used in smaller arts, entertainment, and event venues, including weddings.
I think it'll be all about the numbers. How many people are going to sign up for it? And I think it's going to be a great tool.
Here at Madison Square Garden, people are using their phones, and here's how it works. You download the app, enter in some information, as well as upload your most recent result, and then you're given a QR code that looks like this, and you simply enter the venue. Participation is voluntary, and New Yorkers are able to show alternate proof of vaccinations or testing, but not everyone's thrilled about the new technology.
It's definitely complicated. I worry that it's going to go ahead and separate people. Separate people into a class of people who have it that get certain benefits and a class of people who don't have it and they don't get those benefits. A Change.org petition to say no to the pass already has over 22,000 signatures. All eyes are on potential privacy issues and discrimination against those who opt out of the vaccine. Kirsten Ryan, a New York resident and mother, created the petition and sent Newsy the following statement. I think the people of New York State should have the freedom and right to choose what is best for themselves. If they want to get the vaccine, they should. If they don't, they shouldn't be mandated to do so. It comes down to basic human rights and civil liberties. Government should not be telling their citizens how to live their lives. If successful, the Excelsior app could be used in other states across the U.S. In New York, Ariel Hickson, Newsy.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more In the Loop. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.